Welcome to the Cyber Business Podcast, where we feature top founders and entrepreneurs and share their inspiring stories. Now, let's get started with the show.
Matthew Connor here, host of the Cyber Business Podcast. Today, we're joined by David Hopkins, the CIO of Mesa Airlines, and Matthew Barreras, the Director of Infrastructure and Cybersecurity at Mesa Airlines. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Hi, good to see
Happy
you.
to be here.
All right. Before we get too far in, a quick word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by cyberlinks.com. That's cyberlynx.com. Do you know if a hacker's in your system? Most people and most companies don't until it's too late and a hacker's already done damage. A hacker's job is to bypass your security, so companies need a way of knowing when someone's gotten past their security. That's where CyberLink's intrusion detection comes in. With our 24/7 Security Operations Center, we use a combination of AI and cybersecurity technicians to see when a hacker successfully bypassed your security. So if a bad guy gets past your security, we'll know right away and be able to kick them out. Find out more at cyberlinks.com. That's cyberlynx.com. And now back to our show. David, for those who aren't familiar, can you tell us about Mesa Airlines and your role there as CIO?
You bet, Matthew. So again, David Hopkins, CIO here at Mesa Airlines. We are a regional contract carrier for United Airlines, actually United Express, to be more specific. We call our business above the wing. So we own the aircraft, generally speaking. It's our crews, our flight attendants. United takes care of everything else, baggage, ticketing, all of the payments and things like that. So we fly a certain amount of hours for United Express each month. And you wouldn't even know you were on a Mesa aircraft unless you noticed on the fuselage operated by Mesa Airlines. Otherwise, we're under the United Express livery. And yeah, that's who we are. And so I'm the CIO here. It's a great job. I have full charge responsibility for all things IT, from strategy to purchasing to implementation. Very small team, especially relative to my previous jobs in IT and in the airline. But the nice thing here is everyone wears multiple hats, and we get a chance to get into a little bit of everything. Whereas in past roles, I was more focused in one area or the other. So here at Mesa, we big family, jump in, take care of each other, take care of whatever the problems are, especially here in IT. And we've got a great working relationship with the business unit. They respect us, we respect them, and we get business done.
I love that. You know, I got to ask, because I think a lot of people, at least in the past, and I'm starting to see a trend, you know, that it's changing. But in the past, IT was always seen as just a kind of expense, that it was a necessary expense, but just an expense, and it was, you know, something to be budgeted for. You had to, and as IT leaders, you had to beg, borrow, and steal and fight for every penny. And you were the last ones to kind of get fed at the table. If there was money left over, fine, but do you really need it? Are you seeing a change there? I mean, I think I asked because airlines are so, the margins are tight on airlines. It is a tough industry when it comes to the financial side, and the service is, you know, it's demanding, and people are demanding of airlines, and the pricing is, you know, they're demanding on pricing too. So it's a really tough industry. So, you know, and everybody expects everything to work. The ticketing's got to work. You know, they expect the technology to work 24/7, 365, and then some. Yeah. And yet, do you find that it's still a struggle to get the money that you need? And is that just part of the game, or has it, you know, the nature of the beast, or has it started shifting, you know, as people start to realize the value of IT more?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. And I love the way you characterize that. Is it just, I forget how you said it, was it just part of the game? Yeah. And here's the way I would answer that. Yes, it's still a challenge to get budget and what have you. But that's up to IT really to change that. And we've done that here. And what I mean by that is we show our value. I'm being a little forward with this, but I believe the business like I said, they respect us. They know the value we bring. And so because of that, we're able to do more. But we still have to fight for it, the attention and what have you. And we're kind of taken for granted to some degree. I heard it, IT described as, a light switch. You flip the switch on in the room, you expect the lights to come on. You don't think about all that it takes to make that happen on a day-to-day basis. It's just flip the switch on, it should come on, and that's the way IT should work. But one way that we, I believe, have turned the corner to some degree is by bringing solutions to the business. We have challenges, and sometimes we're able to solve those problems for the business. So really being a true partner, we use that term, everyone uses that term a lot. But by working together to solve these problems with technology has helped us to gain a seat at the table. So I think, yes, I've seen it changing, but I have to take a little credit for ourselves. It's changing because we're making it change. Not just taking whatever comes our way. So yeah, that's the way I would characterize it.
Well, no, I love that because I think we're both old enough and have been in IT long enough to remember back when the job of IT was to get the computers and the networks to work,
Yeah.
and that was a full-time job,
Yes,
even
it
in a
was.
small organization.
Yeah.
Just getting it to work, and now the computers work, the networks work, and now it's a matter of adding value. How do you make things more efficient? And now
Right.
the expectation is everything's always up all the time and everything's really efficient. How do you make it even more efficient? How do you make it to where one person is doing the job of 2 or 10 people with technology? And I think technology has just advanced to that level where it wasn't before. And so now you get to your point, you get to come to the table and show value by bringing solutions, whereas before the value was you getting the computer to work, right?
Yeah. Well, one of the ways we've done that, I will say here, is that this is something I've seen throughout my career. We were talking earlier, Matthew, about how long we've been in this business, and it's been a long time. I've seen the change over the years, and one of the changes is that it used to be you came to IT for everything technology related, and there was tight controls over that to make sure that no shadow IT happened or things like that. But the reality of it is that the business is as savvy in technology a lot of times as some of the IT folks are, and especially the various flavors and aspects of technology. So and business is competitive. We know that, and it's even competitive within Mesa Airlines, for example, or within any entity. We're all trying to achieve our personal goals, business goals, and so forth. And so with that said, the key in my mind is to figure out how to leverage the business's knowledge in IT as well as our knowledge in the business. And so working cooperatively together, you'll achieve something. But if you try to just hold it, like this is my piece, and I know it, you don't, and there's nothing I can learn from you, nothing you can teach me, that's where I think you start having the clash.
Yeah.
So
Couldn't agree more. I think that's what everybody's really learning is that it is much more about collaboration now than it is just providing the tech support, right?
Yeah.
So, well, and part of that is cybersecurity. So now we're gonna ask you there, Matt, as the head of infrastructure and cybersecurity. A big part of technology today is keeping it safe, right? We no longer have to try to just get it up and running. It's running, but now the big threat isn't it going down. It's really it being taken down by some sort of threat. So in terms of cybersecurity at airlines, what are you seeing as kind of the modern challenges, and in terms of, say, it's regulations and threats. I mean, it's a challenge for everybody, but how is it uniquely challenging for airlines?
Yeah, so with aviation, it's a little bit interesting because we are considered critical infrastructure, right? We're critical to national security. And so there are threats that exist today, from nation state actors, from foreign actors, right? And those are some of the big concerns that we have. Interestingly enough, though, the government has been very slow to consider the implications to aviation, right? Up until just recently, until basically a few years ago, we've pretty much in the aviation sector been kind of forgotten about by the government. And then as a result of a executive order during the Biden administration, suddenly we're starting to pay more attention to, okay, aviation is something that we need to secure. And so now we do fall under, regulatory compliance. And it's been interesting to watch the government get their sea legs, to watch the government try to figure out, okay, what is cybersecurity? How does it work with relation to aviation, not just airlines, but airports as well? How does it pertain to critical infrastructure, and how do we secure it? And quite candidly, it has been a challenge. It has absolutely been a challenge because in a lot of ways, we're leading the government in some of the efforts. We're influencing how policy is written. We're influencing how regulation is written. And it's a very interesting time in aviation right now.
I love that. So I'm assuming, since it's government, then it's going to be some sort of NIST compliance that they're saying, hey, you've got to be NIST 800 171, compliant or something like that. Is that what was put out? Was that the requirement?
Yeah, that's exactly it. So the uh, a three-letter agency, which I don't know if I'm allowed to mention, but I think I can actually. So the TSA is ultimately who would end up regulating us, and the guidance that they've given and the framework that they want us to utilize is the NIST CSF specifically. And so that's helpful. At least they have found a framework that's standardized, that's recognized throughout the industry. So that is helpful, but I think they're still trying to learn it themselves a little bit, and we're trying to figure out how best to adopt it for our own practices.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's got to be kind of scary to think of having to answer to TSA on the cyber side, right? I mean, not to knock TSA, right? They've got a
Correct.
real job, but the everybody's impression of TSA is that of checking checking people as they go through the airport. You
Yeah.
don't really think of them in terms of I think it's got to be a is it a mind shift for you to be like, hey, wait, you're I have to answer to you for cybersecurity stuff?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. So, I mean, TSA has traditionally been about physical security, and not cybersecurity. So, and not to get into all the granular details about it, but essentially they've started, sourcing subject matter experts from different agencies, right, and relying a lot upon CISA, right? So CISA, I always forget if it's CISA or CISA. Everybody says it different, I think.
They sure do. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. So they're relying on other agencies within the government because they are relatively new to this.
Yeah, and it makes sense, and that I think has got to be a little scary. I get it, the frame, and I think that's where you're at, right? You've got the framework, and you're like, yeah, the framework makes perfect sense. It's great.
Yeah,
It gives us something a framework to work with from within. But really, TSA, because they did, it's hard to build trust and confidence in somebody that is brand new to something. It's like, okay, I don't know if you're going to ride your bike well for the first time, Timmy, but I'm going to keep my hand on the seat because you're still learning without the training wheels. And so to be holding Timmy, the TSA agent's, a bike as you're going, live with stuff, it's like, really? Shouldn't it be the other way around? Shouldn't Timmy be helping us versus us making sure Timmy doesn't fall off of his TSA cyber bike? I don't know.
yeah,
Maybe that's messed up, but I think that's got to be the natural human reaction to that is, and rightfully so. They're new at it, despite it being mandated upon them, right? So I think that relationship is going to take time to kind of nurture, and as with anything, it takes time to build trust, right? So
yeah.
um,
I will say that is something that is happening, and that collaboration, if you will.
Yes.
The TSA reaches out to us, we to them. We have our regional airline association, and there is obviously a lot of trepidation on how we move forward with working with the TSA and agencies and so forth. It's not because of the TSA; it's because we've got sensitive data, and we want to make sure it stays, secure. And so that's a cooperative arrangement. So, yeah, you hit it on the nail, Matthew. It's we got two Matthews, so it's you see, I guess.
Yeah, it's a tough one. So, I think it's also interesting because now, unlike any other time, so we help a lot of on our Cyberlink side, we help a lot of government contractors with their NIST and CMMC compliance. So when the government says, "Hey, look, you need to be compliant with all these cybersecurity, with this framework," they're like, "Oh yeah, cool." Well, the interesting part is for decades they've been saying, or at least a decade, they've been saying, "Yep, we're compliant," and it was kind of built into their contracts. The government was never coming after them and saying, "Hey, we're going to check." They could always just self-assess and say, "Hey, we're good." And they're like, "Cool." So the problem now is they're like, "Hey, where are we going to get the money for it?" And the government's like, "You've been telling me you've been doing it for for 10 years. What are you talking about the money?" They're like, "But you said, but you said," right? So it's a funny situation. But I think interestingly for the aviation, community now, that industry, now that hasn't been the case. That money hasn't been built into government contracts from the get, and so now they're saying, "Hey, make sure you're compliant." Where's the money come from, right? Now, we've got to have we got to implement this framework. We've got to have the high end security. We've got to have monitoring for it all. We may have to bring on more people. Where's the money? Or I think in some cases I get it for the government contractors where they're using controlled unclassified information, right? That's CUI. It's a little different because now that comes with specific requirements, like it's got to be held in like a government cloud and things like that. For you guys, there is no. Are they saying that things like the PII, right, the personally identifiable information, like the passenger records, right? They're who it is and where they're going. Are they considering that to be kind of CUI that you have to safeguard and comes with additional requirements like moving to a GCC environment with that data? Or are they saying no, just be smart, make sure you're covering doing best practices when it comes to cybersecurity?
Yeah, for us it's okay.
No, you go ahead.
Yeah. For us, it's about they're not as concerned. At least the TSA isn't as concerned with things like PII. It's about the what could be operationally disruptive, right? What would keep us from flying aircraft? What would keep us from being able to fulfill our obligations as an airline? So that's what their focus is right now. And it is kind of interesting, just to kind of piggyback off that for a second. There's also nuances. So the airports and the airlines are both regulated by the same entity, right? But they're entirely kind of different in the way that they operate, obviously. So whereas with the airports, there's a lot of focus on, IT and OT systems and segmenting OT environments and SCADA systems from your IT systems and not being able to breach into the OT environment from the IT environment, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas with airlines, it's more about our flight operation suites. Like, how do we dispatch aircraft? How do we schedule crews? How do we calculate weight and balance? How do we take care of weather? All of that is where the concern is there. And back to the regulator trying to find their sea legs. They want to adopt a one size fits all approach to two really different type of entities, right? But back to your question, it really is more about what is going to be operationally disruptive. And in that respect, it's pretty similar to kind of how what the SEC is concerned with, right? What would affect operations? What would ultimately affect revenue?
Yeah, and as you mentioned earlier, the margins in the airline industry are razor thin, and all this has to be paid for. At the end of the day, it's important. It's the smart thing to do, but none of it gets done without money. And so that is a challenge still because it's more like insurance. It pays for itself once you avoid an incident. It's
Yeah.
very little ROI on the front end. And so that's something that we have to deal with. And some of the regulations in some respects have helped. The new SEC regulation, for example, that now says you must report on a substantial incident. I forget the wording they use. Material, I think,
Material.
breach.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's up to us to define what material is, but then we now have to report on that. That certainly got our board's attention. I'll say that. Not that they were snoozing at the wheel, they were not, but that elevated it. And now I get to talk to them, get in quotes, at least 4 times a year. And I'm at every senior staff meeting. I'm already invited, but I have something to say on cybersecurity every week. So it's getting the attention, and that certainly helps with funding. But it's still a challenge because it's a cost, not a revenue center. It's a cost center.
Yeah.
No,
Well,
I'll
and if
oh, go ahead.
if I'm not mistaken, it's 72 hours to report as well, isn't that right?
I
For
believe you're right.
So
SEC, yeah, I
so
believe so.
yeah, so it's not like you have a lot of time. And I think the good part about that is that it makes it to where people are more hyper aware or more sensitive to the time natureness of it. So it's instead of it being one of these things where it's like, well, we knew we got breached because suddenly the doors wouldn't open and we started getting locked out of stuff. Like that's a little late, right? And so or you found out that somebody's email got hacked because somebody's like, did you mean to send this to me? That's a little late, right? So, I think it's real. I think that really helps the industry, focus more on the intrusion detection and response portion instead of well, look, we've got, this Fort Knox like security. Great. Well, you can have the best security in the world, but if, for your home, but if the kids are letting somebody in, be like, what do you mean you left the plumber in 2 days ago? Like there's still a plumber in the house? I didn't call a plumber.
Yes.
Right? You got to have a way of knowing. And then suddenly, bad stuff starts going disappearing in your house, right? The locks get changed. Nobody can get into the house. The plumber's in there. Right. So you got to have a way of knowing when somebody's gotten in. And I think, things like that are, becoming more standard practice and in people's minds, like, well, we need to know because hackers, when ransomware started becoming more prevalent, we found out that it was sometimes up to 6 months or longer that they were in a system before we found 6 months. Really? Like that's insane. And now that they're starting to use more intrusion detection, that number is shrinking and hackers are trying to traverse the network faster. But I think that's, just such an important thing. And I'm not big on government regulation, but I think there are times when things like that really do help. But going back to your point is with razor thin margins, it really is a thing where everybody's got to be as competitive as possible to make, to roll out this technology in an affordable way. Because it can't just be like these, massive things where you rewind 10 years ago, putting in any sort of, even just like a SIM or anything was a massive, expense. And you're paying heavy 6 figures just to get it implemented. And then, just to put it in and then implement it. It's cost prohibitive. Now it's getting much better. I didn't have a question there. I just kind of went off on my own rant. I was like, oh, hey, very excited. So that's unhelpful. Bad interviewer. But it is, I find it very exciting.
We agree. We agree. Absolutely. Matt, I think you were getting ready to say something.
Oh, yeah, I'll
Um,
respond to what you said too. I mean, it is an exciting time to watch the industry mature, right? And to see where, to your point, we're no longer having to make, substantial investments up front in order to secure systems. I mean, there's good OpEx models that are available. There's managed security service providers out there. There's managed SOC. There is a solution for every size company, right? And so it's cool to watch that maturity occur. Yeah, I guess that was
Yeah.
comment to
Well,
add on that.
what I was going to say also is one of the reasons I got into this business, if you will, IT, is because it's ever changing. It moves fast. It's just absolutely fascinating. Now, that's the dark side of that is I use this term all the time. It's whack-a-mole when it comes to cybersecurity because there's new threats coming left and right. And uh, the one of the directors of the government agency talked about how some of the bad actors are planting bots and such on our infrastructure to awaken at some point when the time is right to strike, and that's a lot of it's scary. But I think another thing that is maybe a little lighthearted, if you will, but it's bringing attention is that I've seen more and more entertainment movies about breaches and cybersecurity hacks and so forth, and so it's raising everyone's attention. And then lastly, you're absolutely right. The biggest thing, in my opinion, is the threat of someone leaving the door open, so to speak, or inviting in, the bad actors. And that's one of the reasons why Matt and I put a lot of emphasis on education, trying to make sure the business knows the threat and not to click on that link or read that email or respond or what have you. But they've gotten, the bad guys have gotten more and more clever, and so we keep trying to make sure first off we're educated and understand the threat, and then we share that with our business unit as well. That's key.
Well, I love that because I think it's so important. I think that the numbers are still really high on it comes from end users, more than a a bad actor finding a vulnerability in the system. So to that end, what have you guys have you found any great success in educating, something that you can share with people as to, hey, this was a breakthrough moment for us. I think this is just working really well. It wasn't so much a breakthrough, but this is what we do and it really works because our folks are well educated. They don't fall for our phishing campaigns. What are you guys doing, or what have you found success with when it comes to educating?
Well, I'll go first, Matt, and I'm sure you've got even more. But the thing that I would say gives me uh, some oh, what's the word? Hope, if you will, is when my colleagues say, we roll out a training session. And then they'll come to me and say, I really enjoyed that. That was good. And it was really helpful. So a couple of them said they used it at home with their families to explain what's going on. I mean, that is so huge because we're used to, as you said at the top, we're a strategic and a competitive piece of the business, but often we're looked at as a utility, if you will. And so for the business to come up and say, that was good, you got my attention, that's huge for us. So, I can't speak to a specific threat that we've thwarted as a result of education, but we do roll out training regularly, and we follow up with folks with when they click on the link of the phishing campaign or what have you, and with additional training. But Matt, you got anything else there?
Yeah, no, I mean it can't be overstated the importance of a good security awareness training program. Because yeah, as we've discussed previously, I mean, uh, our end users end up inadvertently being our the biggest threats to our environment, right? But it doesn't have to be boring. It doesn't have to be just, HR type style videos, made in the 80s and 90s that we send around. There are good solutions out there that you don't have to put much administrative effort into. I don't know if I'm allowed to vendor plug
Yeah,
here,
go
but
for it.
yeah,
Fire.
so we're using KnowBe4 is what we're using, and we've been very happy with their solution. Because yeah, they've got engaging training. We're also able to use phishing simulation testing through them as well, and then as a result of those failed phishing simulated attacks, we can assign remedial training. And we stay consistent with it. It's not just a one time a year occurrence. It's not just your check the box for security awareness training. It's continuing to remind people throughout the year through simulated tests or additional training modules or, cybersecurity awareness month, et cetera, et cetera. It's continuing to remind them throughout the year the importance of it. And I think it's good too for a more general IT visibility. Like people in the company realize that we don't just keep the lights on, that we're actively involved in trying to protect them and protect the company. So it's good. Yeah.
No, I totally agree. I think Know Before is doing a great job. Breach
Yeah.
Secure Now, two really great, the providers that we provide both. I mean, they're fantastic. I mean, people rave about the videos. Sometimes they're so funny that they literally they share them with family and friends. They're like, it's hysterical. Or they actually talk about them. We had a client come to us and we're specifically like, we'd love to, you do offer this, right? Because this is like a deal, it's like a deal breaker for them. They dislike their current provider, but they wanted to keep their cybersecurity training. I was like, and I forget whether it was Breach Secure Now or Know Before. It was one of the two. But we were like, absolutely, because they literally had people throughout the week talking about the videos, and like it's unbelievable. They couldn't believe it. And you're right. If it's not the boring stuff, and where you just sit in a room for an hour,
Yeah.
every quarter or every year, we already know that people they forget 90% of it. I think technically it's 75% within like 15 minutes, and then within an hour 90 some percent of it is gone. And so it's like, what's the point? Why were we even there? It
Yeah.
doesn't make any sense to do that, and it's nobody's favorite topic except for us. Like, we get it, we geek out on it, it's fun for
Yeah.
us, but it's like it's not a lot of fun for the participants, right? So no, I'm right there with you. I think that's fantastic. Now, earlier we were talking about, that you'd mentioned technology and kind of staying on the leading edge. And of course, in everybody's mind is AI, and, kind of where that's taking us. And, there's a lot of fun things happening, even in aviation, aviation technology with like EV tolls and stuff like that. So there's a lot of fun stuff happening. But in terms of AI, where do you guys see that playing a role in either the cyber defense for you guys, or in operations? Where do you see it in the aviation industry?
You want to start, Matt? Or
Oh, I'll let you go ahead. Go ahead.
okay, okay. Well, I am just blown away with where we've come with AI. I started my career way back in '84 at Texas Instruments, programming. I started off in the testing area and doing some programming in Lisp on AI models, just playing around in our research area back then. And when I look at what we were doing then and where we are now, it is absolutely incredible. Again, that's why I got into this business. It's fascinating. It moves fast. And I've always said I'm not afraid of technology. I embrace it, but AI is a little different. I embrace it as well. I'm excited by it. But this certainly feels like it's moving faster than we can keep up with. And so I can't tell you specifically how it'll be leveraged by the bad guys to get to infiltrate, but I have no doubt it will. Um, I had three goals when I joined Mesa about 3 years ago. Number one was to stand up a substantial cybersecurity platform, and we've done that. Number two was actually a two-part data analytics platform, as well as a ticketing ServiceNow type. We actually went with Freshservice uh, uh, system. And then number three was to dabble, I'll call it, in AI. And I say it that way because we're, again, thin margins, small regional carrier, don't have unlimited resources. So we've been able to check the box on all of those. But AI is one that we have not gone as far as I'd like to go. We've got a couple of great ideas and projects. Matter of fact, we've got one that I was had a demo on just last week from one of my guys who's working on it to help the business. But from a cybersecurity perspective, it's I'm not sure where it's going to be used, but I know it will be, and so we're just trying to keep our eyes open, eyes and ears open, and take as many training courses. I keep signing up for stuff to try to stay on top of that. I'm sure Matt does as well, but that's where I'm at right now with that.
Yeah, and I think for me, I'm defense oriented right now with the with the AI space. I'll tell you what, Microsoft has done an incredible job at marketing, like Copilot, for example. I just want to use that as one example, because we've got, executives and people throughout the business unit saying, I want to use Copilot. I want to use Copilot with Office, and I want to use Copilot with Teams. And you've got me pumping the brakes a little bit, like, well, I don't know if we want to just turn that on just yet. And we've engaged with Microsoft and we've looked into some of their what we have deployed today, and we're looking at advancing some of the capabilities within their compliance portal within Purview, right? Making sure that we've got good information barriers around data. Because when we first tested it just internally, we asked a question about credit cards and it pulled data from some source somewhere out there and found a credit card number. It's like those are the kind of things that you really have to be careful with, especially with like Copilot and some of these chatbots. Is like what data is it training on, and do you have the proper controls around that data? And so right now I'm pumping the pedal just a little bit on some of those initiatives throughout the business, but because we need to do it securely, and I think that's important to put as a priority is the security of that data that's going into those models.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. And I think it's really easy to get excited by by what's happening and how it can benefit the organization. We already see the bad guys using AI, using free AI. Just now it's, we all know it used to be so obvious that Nigerian prince was not real because his English was so bad, and all these other email scams. It was always the English that was, come on, that was the giveaway. But now that's perfect English, and they were renting perfect, campaigns, not just the email, but then let's say for let's say they wanted to steal your Microsoft 365 credentials, not just even the credentials. Now they can, for a few dollars a month. The return on investment is insane. They're on the black, on the black market, let's call it, on the dark web. They're actually turning this into a business where you invest, it's like $1,500, and the reward is like $150,000, in within a month from these campaigns. They're making insane money, but because it's so professional, when you click on what looks like it's an email from Microsoft and it looks very, very, very good, then you go to a website that is actually looks exactly right, and then even if you don't click on it, even if you don't put it, you're like, is it? Let me just go log in myself. They can steal your token, and now they're off, and they're logged in as you. So they've gotten so much better thanks to AI, and now the money that has flowed into to the dark web and all these bad, to these bad actors. They've now reinvested this into becoming far more professional. So I see AI really, on our end, how do we combat that as an industry and as the collective good guys? How do we leverage that technology, to defend us? And I see, we're doing great things with when it comes to things like SentinelOne and CrowdStrike. I know CrowdStrike's probably a sore topic in the aviation industry. There's a little bit, but at least on the SentinelOne side, where and even on when it comes to going through logs, there's just an inconceivable amount of information that comes through every second, from even a relatively small organization, to be able to track on all of that in real time and say, oh, look, Matt couldn't have logged in Paris. Matt's in Phoenix. How did he log in 15 minutes after he was just logged in Phoenix? And to be able to catch that quickly, that's where I think we're seeing AI being such a great tool, in terms of catching the bad guys when they get into the network. Like, this is weird. This app shouldn't be encrypting stuff. This app shouldn't be doing this. I know it says it's, Adobe Acrobat, and it's got its certification, it's cert, but it's doing weird stuff, right? So using AI to actually see that unlike, it used to be. I mean, that stuff was science fiction, 10, 15 years ago. It's really hard. Like before we moved over to using AI powered, tools for defense, we would lock the place down, right? It was like Fort Knox. Everything got locked down. If it wasn't whitelisted, it was blacklisted and it couldn't be run. And you were asking for permission to do everything. And when an application tried to do and that slows down the organization, and it's not smart, right? Because then if you do get those supply chain attacks where they've injected, their code into Adobe, and we've seen it with like SolarWinds, have been supply chain attacks. That's a great way to get in. Then what do? Well, I don't know. Adobe was cleared to do whatever Adobe wanted to do because it's Adobe, right? So I see AI doing some really good stuff there. And I think the future is really exciting to see where it takes us in terms of defense. But going back to what you said initially, David, it is this game, it's an ongoing game of whack-a-mole where we've got to be faster and better. And it's never going away. I don't think there's ever going to be a day, especially given how much money has now traded hands and is now, funding these bad actors. I don't think that game's ever going to stop. And so we just need better tools to where we have the auto whack-a-mole 2000 who's super duper fast, and we don't have to worry about it because the auto whacker is on the job. But
no, I agree. And it was about this time last year, or maybe a year and a half ago, that I learned about, ransomware as a service. I'm like, oh my God, for $75 per target or less, you can set up a ransomware. And like you said earlier, there's a lot of money in that. So yeah, that's scary. So.
It really is. Guys, this has been an absolute blast. I mean, I think we could do this all day. And I want to thank both of you for coming on. I think this was really enlightening. I think you guys are doing great stuff at Mesa. It's always a fun day there. And Phoenix is one of my favorite places in the world. I keep trying to get my wife to agree to move there. I'm a big fan of Scottsdale. Try to get her, and her defense is that there's no, it's the water supply. So, her inner doomsday prepper is like, is it sustainable? I'll grant you that it's not really sustainable with water, but it's so great. Come on. So in any event, love what you guys are doing out there. But before we go, I want to give each of you a chance to tell everybody where they can find out more about you individually and where they can find out more about Mesa. So David, if you'd kick it off.
Sure. Well, mesa-air.com is our website. Got lots of info there. I'm on LinkedIn and other social media platforms. But I think that's probably the best way to reach out to me and to the company.
Fantastic. And Matt?
Yeah, I mean, David said it, mesa-air.com. And you can find me on LinkedIn, Matthew with 1 T. And then last name is Barreras. Oh.
Fantastic. Guys, thanks again for coming on. And until next time.
All right. Take care, Matthew.
You too.
Thanks for listening to the Cyber Business Podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.